Pareshu Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Seva Bhagavati Uttamashuki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Nigamalka Padugalitam Padam Shukamakaramita Darisamitam Pivata Bhagatam Rashamara Mahora Horisika Bhuveka Krishna Sadam Bhagade Dhammyada Darisamitam Pivatanasha Paranako Dunodita Twamapiya Dabhishuta Vishutam Bibu Samapya Yenavidam Bribhuktanam Prakyahidaho Mohodaram Sankleshanavanamusanti Nanyatam Atmaramastamuni Nagranti Kurva Admaramastamuni Nagranti Koru not remembering. Atmaramastamuni Nagranti Kavada Kurvanti Apita Itam Bhutam Ganahari. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhudi Pandu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kantara Kantanamostute Jayatam Surito Pango Mama Manir Matir Di Matsava Shapadam Boja Radana Madana Mohanam Sriman Rasarasarambi Vamsi Badakarsan Vinashanupya Gopinata Sri Sirha Dibyad Vrindarani Kapadrumada Srimad Radnagana Shima Sanistana Sri Sirada Shila Govinda Prasadevi Seva Manushamarami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanyataya Chajigaditaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandhu Jagapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Kanta Namostate Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vindam. Good morning, Natasha. Brent, Lilavati, three of my favorite people. Wow. I feel so warm and toasty to begin our Wisdom Wednesday section. Let me tell you, we had some interesting visitors yesterday. There's a department works with the federal State Department, I believe. It's local. It's called Utah Global Diplomacy. And they come periodically, every couple of months they come and they bring a different group that would have been touring Utah from different countries. We've had groups from Bolivia, Argentina. We've had quite a few groups from Pakistan and India. And yesterday morning, we had 20 students from Iraq, teenage students from Iraq. They were here for several hours. They took lunch. They toured the farm, took the llamas for a walk. They had a Q&A session with myself. They had a wonderful kirtan with Agni Dev. And yeah, it was one of a series. There have been at least a half a dozen in the past, and we look forward to there being more in the future as well. Yeah, now, an interesting thing was that in the evening, I had a visit from an old friend. I used to be on the BBT library party of the Moga Lila in 1978. Moga Lila and I and Bhaktitirtha Swami, Mahabhuti, Dear Krishna Maharaj, Mahaduti Swami, Sri Galim, and then Satrup was overcharged. We crisscrossed the country, placing Prabhupada's books in college libraries all over the country. So he just calls out of the blue. He's traveling between LA and Chicago with a Chinese devotee named Kevin Wu, and can they spend the night? So they arrived a little late, about 9 o'clock, and we talked. We did a little catch up. I was curious to know, how is it? Oh, and here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. They're distributing books to Muslims. They're distributing books in Arabic and Parsi to Muslims. And Moga Lila, actually, he grew up as the son of Hindu missionaries in India and Pakistan, so he speaks Parsi. And he's, in fact, taught at one stage at the university there in Lahore. But I was curious to know, how's this Chinese fellow? And he's been doing it quite some time. He's the #1 book distributor in the world in the Hare Krishna movement. I say, do you speak Arab? I'm asking. He knows a few words. He knows enough words to sell a book. And he says, Allah and Bakshish. And he's the biggest book distributor in the world. So I just happened to have mentioned to them that we had a group of students from Iraq earlier in the day, and they're like, oh my gosh, why didn't we come earlier? But anyway, they got the contact information, so they're going to offer some free books to them. So I asked the Chinese fellow, I said, how is it you come to be distributing books in Arabic? And I said, do you speak Arabic? He says, no, just enough words to get by. And I never, it didn't really fit together. He said he went to the head of the Middle Eastern publishing of the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, and he asked him, do you have books, or the Chinese? He went and asked the Chinese, do you have books in Mandarin? He wanted to distribute books in Chinese, his own native language, native people. They said no. In the course of that conversation, the head of the publishing company suggested that he distribute books to Muslims, and he took it to heart. So he's the biggest book distributor in the world. So they're spending the night here. Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Isn't it? So yesterday, where we left off was that the smiling Lord creates all living beings, 8,400,000 species of life in this material world, spread throughout upper, middle, and lower planetary systems. Each one has their own independence. They're all created by God, but he does not program them to follow God's will. They are not pre-programmed in that sense. Krishna allows them independence. He allows them free will. God is avigna sarat. God is completely independent. He does whatever he wants. There's no higher power that prompts him or pushes him or coerces him or forces him into a certain course of action. He can follow any course of action he wants with his unlimited power and his omniscience. Oh, he creates living beings in a way that no other creator can create. All of the creators create copies, carbon copies, like one after another, the same, coming off the assembly line, and they're pre-programmed to act according to the will of the creator. Now, here's a creator, Krishna, who creates, and at the same time creates with independence, endows his creations with free will, so that they can, ironically, reject him should they so choose. And when they reject him, they come to this prison house of this material world. You cannot remain in the spiritual world when you're envious of God. You have to go to another world, which is created just in order to cater to the needs of those who want to be disparate from the Lord. The Lord doesn't begrudge us that. He out of his energies, it's not his superior spiritual energy. I will have to say that. It's his inferior material energy. It's temporary, has a beginning, middle, and end. Everything in the material world goes through the 6 phases of growth, birth, growth, transformation, reproduction, duration, dwindling, and vanishing. It has those shortcomings, which are not present in the spiritual world. But nevertheless, the Lord creates this world, and this world, although it's not up to the standard of the spiritual world, it's a pretty dazzling place. I think you have to agree. I go on my treadmill in the morning, and there's a monitor. And while I'm chanting rounds or reviewing my rap songs and all like that, I just like to put on these videos from YouTube that show you beautiful scenes all over the world. It's very humbling to be on your treadmill chanting rounds or rehearsing songs or otherwise going through verses, and to see scenes come up one after another, just unbelievable scenes of nature involving water and earth and fire. Some of the scenes are volcanoes. Quite a few are beaches and docks in the Caribbean, or in beaches on the Riviera, Thailand. Others involve cascading waterfalls all over the world. Some of them are underwater caves, whether divers or people going through a low overhanging rock on boats to get into the interior. This is just one tiny dot in a universe, which is one dot amongst millions of universes. And there's so much on this Earth planet. It's so much. I feel sorry for people many wealthy people, when they get spendable, disposable income, first thing they do is they travel. They travel. They see themselves as sitting in a restaurant in some exotic place, eating the native foods of the area, looking out over a vista. I remember when I was a younger fellow, I was in Thailand. I was traveling on a Jeep with one Malay guy and one Chinese guy, and we were selling pills, uh, energy pills for the people whose backs were sore from picking cane or whatever they do in the fields there. So we'd stopped for the night in some place that they'd never seen a white man before. That's how remote it was. And we were sitting on this veranda. The veranda was actually built over a large river. And of course, there were lush greenery everywhere. There were natives finishing up their business, coming in from the fields, um, having their dinners. It was a very beautiful scene, domestic pastoral scene along the banks of the river as we sat on the wooden deck over the river. And what struck my mind was the elephants are like trucks. They didn't have that many motorized vehicles in that place at that time. So the elephants had done a full day's work along with their handlers, hauling logs or whatever it was they did. And the handlers had them in the river at the end of the day in twilight, and they were scrubbing them. They were scrubbing them with brushes. The elephants were either upright and the handlers were on their backs scrubbing them, or they were lying on their side. And I just have that picture in my mind. It's kind of this idyllic picture. And imagine if you had enough disposable income, you could travel all over the world, and every night you could be in some sort of memorable scene like that. And you can't, because there's too much on this planet. There's too much. So as far as I'm concerned, it's more than enough. I'm grateful just to be able to see all these things in video and just get the general picture that God is great. Attai bahonena kim ganam vishtavyam ekankshanasted, all that is opulent and glorious and beautiful in this material world. What to speak of the spiritual world springs from but anksha, a small part of Krishna's creation. I don't need to spend money, waste money going here and there just so I can send postcards back home, or just so that I can have extensions to the visa of my passport, or that I can tell people that I've been here and done that and sat there. If it were finite, and maybe so, there's X number of places you visit and then you're done, maybe so, but you'll never be done. And when you leave this lifetime, when you leave this planet, there'll be another planet to explore, and another and another. There is no limit to God's creation, even so far as this material world is concerned, what to speak of the spiritual world. So here are my points. First of all, first point is God creates 8,400,000 species of life, endowed with free will. Those who conform to his will get to go home back to Godhead. Their exile from the spiritual world is short-lived. They come here, they engage in Krishna's service, they don't get distracted, they go back home. Speaking of distractions, during a previous Zoom call, Brent and Carmen and Natasha, I think you were also involved in that creative endeavor. I forget what the subject was, but I asked everyone to make a poetic contribution, and everybody did. They were quite brilliant. Brent and Natasha and Carmen, I think you were the three, and myself. So everyone in the comment section commented on this, the material world, the nature of the material world. And I was so inspired by the various compositions that I took time afterwards and put them all together and added a little something. And I came up with this poem, which I'll share with you right now. It's called The Material World is Like a Shopping Mall. The material world is like a shopping mall, hustling, bustling, and loud. Distraction and attractions abound. Sights and sounds can enshroud like clouds, obscuring the ground. Better not to wander lost in the crowd, aimless, our mission forgotten, our commission under remission. Life's endless paths distract and delay. The stores in life's mall can lead you astray. Better discriminate to see Maya's bait. Stick to the straightaway in order to reach heaven's gate. Pick up only that provision which will get you out of prison. Revive your eternal condition. We need to listen to the sage by whose graces. We need to listen to the sages by whose grace we are engaged, by whose vision we are risen. It's not worth the risk to stray from Krishna's shopping list. Better not too much stopping, hopping from aisle to aisle, swapping precious minutes for trinkets. Here is the gist of Krishna's list. Chant my name, claim my protection. Let go of tension. Let my affection sustain you. Keep your attention on me exclusively. As we enter Maya's store, better to get less than more. Stick to the list. Don't miss eternal Krishna bliss because of the hiss of Maya's kiss. Be like the bee that looks only for the flower, not the stem or the leaves. Devotees can take oil from water, milk from venom, the clean from the soil. As you traverse life's plane, do what you came for and nothing more. Don't be tempted by the glitter, filter out the litter. Rather than frittering away your life, splintering consciousness, going astray, stay the course, back to the source, the root of creation, the absolute truth, the ever-existing youth who plays upon his flute. So thank you all of you, whether you are aware of it or not, you all partnered with me in creating that song called The Shopping Mall. So this is the nature of this world. It is potentially very distracting. You can lose sight of the spiritual world from whence we come, lose sight of that world which is eternal, full of knowledge and bliss, and get very, you can spend lifetimes, and we have, not that we could, we have, that's our history, our common history. We've all spent dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of previous lifetimes being enamored with this inferior creation of the Lord. So we have the independence to opt out of the spiritual world and go to this material world in order to try to fulfill our desires born from envy, to compete with the Lord, to have people say our names, to have our name in the newspaper, to have our family, our country, our wealth, our land, our house. I, and my are the two most often names, words in any language. I and mine. Everyone in this material world speaks in terms of I and mine. This means that we're here because each and every one of us has misused, and each in our own ways, the free will that God gave us. And the fact that we misuse the free will that God freely gave us indicates that there's no greater creator, there's no greater living being than God. Every time you make a bad decision, you're glorifying God in a roundabout way, in a left-handed way. You're glorifying God every time you make a bad decision. And when you make a good decision, that is by definition, a good decision is by definition a decision whereby you're reading a book that honors God, you're looking at a movie that honors God, you're eating food that honors God, you're working in such a way that honors God, you're recreating in such a way that honors God, you're raising a family in such a way that honors God, you're interacting with your fellow employees or your fellow workers in a way that honors God. That is the definition of a good decision. A good decision is a decision that honors God by definition, and a bad decision in a roundabout way also honors God, because you wouldn't be able to make that bad decision had not God had the grace to give you free will in the first place. You can't misuse free will if you don't have it. People say, well, why did God give us free will? Why didn't he just create us to love him, to go on the straight and narrow? Because then the love wouldn't mean anything. Love is a function of free will properly exercised. And misery is a function of free will improperly exercised. You cannot offer people the potential of eternal bliss and knowledge in an intimate, loving affair with the supreme flute-playing youth who's all attractive. You cannot offer that on the one hand without offering or making available the option to, by the misuse of one's freedom, dig a hole and create unlimited suffering for one. You can't have the one without the other. You can't have a voluntary, intimate, eternal, deep, fulfilling, meaningful, joyful, loving relationship with God. You can't have that without the proper exercise of free will. But along with that comes, of course, free will means that you can also misuse it. These are the two things that God does, which are extraordinary. The one is that he creates living beings. And when you think about it, all the 8,400,000 species of life are more or less modeled after the divine form of God. Krishna has a head, he has a neck, he has arms, he has a chest, he has a belly, he has a waist, he has hips, he has thighs, he has knees, he has calves, ankles, he has lotus feet, and he has toes on the end of those feet as well as fingers on the end of his hands. That is the ultimate form. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satyana Anadira Dir Govind Sarvakarana. That form of Krishna, we may say human-like, but the form of Krishna is not human-like. The human form is God-like. We are created in the image of God. Those of us who have human forms, our human bodies, such as they are created in the image of God. And therefore, of all created living beings, the human beings are the most fortunate. They have the opportunity to make the right decision, go back home, back to Godhead. Now, when you go below the human beings on the evolutionary ladder, so to speak, you see the human form of body, but it gets perverted by layers and layers of ignorance. For instance, you go all the way down to a tree. A tree has one leg, and it eats through that leg, and its arms are spread out in the form of its branches. A fish basically has arms and legs, but its arms are stunted. He doesn't have fingers on the ends of those arms. So he just has gills. He has lungs just like we have, but the lungs have a special ability to process oxygen while the fish is underwater. He has legs, but the legs are kind of stunted into tail fins. But wherever you go to the lower, the subhuman species of life, you can see that originally the form of the human, of God was there, but as one gets covered more and more thickly and deeply with ignorance, the forms below the human form, the subhuman forms they resemble less and less the distinct, unique, specific features of the human form. So you get down to a single cell living entity, and it's got two little bumps where there were once arms, and two little bumps where there were once legs, and a little bump where there's once a head. Just like, for instance, as a crude analogy, me, you look at me, you can see my features here on the monitor screen. You can see my glasses, you can see my eyes, you might be able to see the color of my eyes, you can see the wrinkles in my forehead, you can see my nose, the shape of my nose, two nostrils, see my mouth, the curvature, you can see my lips, you can see my ears, you see all these specific features. However, if I cover myself, if I drape a sheet over myself or a blanket over myself, then those features all blur, to say the least. They blur, can no longer pick out individual features. I'm still there, the essential form is still there, but because I'm covered with a blanket, all the distinct, specific, clear, delineated features then become blurred. What to speak if I cover myself with 2 blankets, 3 blankets, 4 blankets, 5 blankets, 6 blankets. So essentially, we're spirit souls, part and parcel of God. We have our original spiritual form, made in the image of God. God has a spiritual form, which is full of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. We're created from that same substance. We're spiritual beings full of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. And we have forms. We have arms and legs in our eternal spiritual form. But as you see me today, you're not seeing my original spiritual form as a servant of the Lord, as a friend of the Lord, as a lover of the Lord, as a parent of the Lord, as a passive servitor of the Lord. You're seeing something else covered with flesh, blood, fire, and air, earth, and all these things. So what you're seeing is not the real me, because I have taken that free will and used it to distance myself from God. And as I distance myself mentally from God, as I make decisions which do not have God in the middle of them, my form deviates from my original spiritual form because I'm covering it, putting layers and layers of ignorance and passion over it. Does that make sense? Now, having talked, I think is quite extensively on the creation, let's talk about the second point, for today's discussion, that God not only creates the species, but he supplies. He doesn't just good luck. No, he creates us. He allows us to deviate from his sheltering protection and to leave, pack our bags, storm off from the spiritual world to this material world. But in this material world, he supplies those rebellious, misled living beings, envious, with all the necessities of life. Just look at how high-minded God is. He doesn't get offended. He doesn't get bitter. He doesn't get resentful. He doesn't feel the less because we have declined to worship him. He still loves us, and he has patience. He has tolerance, and he's going to extend to us, even in this material world, all of the necessities of life for our maintenance. I like to look at the beautiful scenes in the world in the morning when I go on my treadmill. And another series of shows in a different category are the Discovery channels, there are hours and hours, if not days and weeks and months of videos about the amazing species that exist in the water, in the sky, on the land, in fire. There are whole, science discovers whole civilizations of aquatics that live like 15 miles below the surface of the ocean. It was previously thought and assumed that only under certain circumstances, ideal circumstances, could life exist. And outside of the circumstances, if there's too much water pressure, for instance, or not enough light, for instance, or too much heat, there's too much fire, that life couldn't exist. And yet scientists are discovering that life exists, doesn't matter how hot it is, doesn't matter how dark it is, doesn't matter how deep in the ocean is, doesn't matter how much pressure there is. Human beings, they go diving, and if they go 100, 200 feet down, they have to be very careful how they come back to the surface. They have to do it very slowly in stages because there's so much pressure on them the deeper they go. And if they come to the surface too quickly, that decompression will kill them. It can be fatal. So they have to be very, very careful how they come up. So they discovered their whole life forms living 15 miles. If we in a human body with an oxygen mask and a diver's tank are at risk of our lungs collapsing from a dive that's 100 feet or 30 or 40 feet below the surface, can you imagine what the pressure is? 10, 15 miles below the surface? Can you imagine what the pressure is? So what does it take to survive under those circumstances? And yet they're whole aquatic life forms. Another example is fire. And now we're experiencing record-breaking heat in summers all over the world. I find it, I used to like to go out, June, July, August. I used to like to go out, garden and hoe and be outside for a couple of hours a day. Now it's like you really have to gird yourself. You have to like mentally toughen yourself if you're going to spend 15, 20 minutes or half an hour outside, because the heat it closes in on you. It depresses you. It's like a physical hand that grasps you. So we assumed for many centuries that outside of a certain temperature range, there couldn't be life. Life couldn't exist. And yet, in recent years, they've discovered that at 600 degrees, where there's volcanic activity, where there's fire, even at 600 degrees, there are living beings who are existing, whole civilizations. What does it take How ingenious is God to have created bodies that can withstand the pressure at the depth of the ocean, withstand the pressure of 600 degrees in fire. And this indicates to us that there's not only life on this planet under all different kinds of watery, aquatic conditions, fiery conditions, but that there is no planet without life, because in each and every planet, which is spread throughout this universe, there are different combinations of oxygen, of fire, of water. And if we learn from the authoritative source of the Vedic scriptures that the soul cannot be scorched by a blaze, no water can drown the spirit, no wind can make it fade. You cannot cut another, nor can you bleed. The soul is eternal, unborn, a seed, indivisible, indestructible, forever free from birth, death, and old age and disease. Yet, however turned or tossed, the soul can never self-exhaust. Seated in the heart, beating its drum, powering everyone, the soul's superior force lives on and runs its endless course in God's unlimited universe. The superior force of the soul cannot be burned by fire, cannot be drowned by water, cannot be withered by the wind. That tells us that life exists on each and every planet within the universe. Whether on a particular planet there's a predominance of air, or there's a predominance of water, or there's a predominance of fire, the soul cannot be burned by fire, drowned by water, or withered by the wind. So that means, although, of course, living beings can't assume bodies like our bodies under these earthly conditions, there are living beings, there is life on each and every planet. They simply have bodies adapted to the particular circumstances of that planet. So you go to the Discovery Channel and your jaw just drops to see all the variegated species and their different abilities. There are fish in the ocean that when a predator comes towards them, they release a chemical that blinds the fish. It makes them invisible. The fish can't see their prey. There are other fish that when the shark comes to eat them, they also exude a certain chemical that the shark actually comes, and with its open mouth, it takes the fish inside of its mouth. Now, the fish is inside of the mouth, and all the shark has to do is close its mouth, and the fish will be consumed. But the fish exudes a chemical that paralyzes the jaw of the shark. Just imagine. Just imagine. It paralyzes the jaw of the shark. So the fish is swimming around inside the mouth of the shark, and he's like having a party. He's not stressed out. He's not worried. His blood pressure is not going up. He's not freaking out. He's not panicking. He's not losing it. Because he knows that God has given him this defensive ability to protect him, even within the mouth of the shark. Devotees like that also. That's our faith at work. We know that if we simply keep faithful to the lotus feet of Krishna, Krishna will protect us against any and all circumstances. In ancient lore, we are told the story of a 5-year-old boy named Prahlad, whose faith in Krishna was pure and bold, ignited within the womb. His love shone like the moon. Krishna's chants filled his soul. Even as his father's rage viciously unfolded, Prahlad's father, Hiranyakashipu, a demon king, demanded worship and decreed that everyone his praises sing. But in his heart, Prahlad yearned to be free. His father used threats and torments to break his son, his spirit to destroy. Though poisoned, trampled, and thrown in the ocean, Prahlad's devotion remained unbroken. Through every trial, Prahlad held fast. The Lord protected him as he passed every test. Even Holika, the demoness of fire, herself was burned on a flaming pyre. To kill the demon, the Lord emerged from a pillar with a mighty roar. Narasringa, half man, half lion, tore the demon apart. Prahlad pleaded to the Nrsinga with a tear in his eye, Lord, please hear my cry, though my father was blinded by pride, consumed by hatred, break into his darkness and let mercy preside. Prahlad's devotion conquered all. The Lord made an exception of his father, and out of his broken body offered redemption for the soul. May the story of Prahlad be forever told. His faith was untamed despite a demon king's rage. Devotion was his armor, come what may. Krishna's names never left his lips. May the fame of those who proclaim the glories of the Lord live forevermore. If you care to burst into song with me, you're welcome to do so. Tavakada kamalabare nakam abhuta shringam dalita hiranya kashipu tanu bringam kesavadita narahare rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hari Jaya Jagadisha Hari Jaya Jagadisha Hari Namaste Narashingaya Pralalala Hiranyakashipur Bhaksha Silatam Kanakalaye Tonishing Apare Tonishingho Yato Yato Yaminta Tonishingho Vahir Nishing Aryadaye Nishingho Nishingamadim Sadanam Prabhadai. So the Lord created all kinds of living beings with free choice, and then he made an arrangement for all their necessities of life. Nitya Nityanam Eko Yovidadatikama, the one supreme Nitya, the one supreme eternal, who is the source of all of the living beings. He's Nitya, he's singular eternal, we're Nityanam, we're plural eternal. He's the creator, we're the created, in 8,400,000 of beings. Eko Yovidadatikama. Having created us uniquely in a way that no other creator could do, he then provides for us whatever we need to maintain our material bodies in terms of air, in terms of water, in terms of food, in terms of shelter, in terms of reproduction, in terms of defending ourselves. And if you have no defenses, if you're a 5-year-old boy like Prahlad, the Lord offers his own personal protection. The Lord will be your bodyguard. He'll be your personal defender. If you simply depend upon him, take shelter of him by chanting his holy names. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. When you think about it, the human beings are the least qualified to defend themselves. They don't have claws, they don't have teeth, they don't have fur, they can't run very fast, they can't fly, they can't jump, they can't burrow. They don't have armor, they don't have a shell like a turtle, they don't have a body like that of an armadillo. Practically speaking, you put a human being in the middle of a jungle and he's the most vulnerable of all the creatures there. He has no defenses whatsoever. But for the human being, Krishna offers himself as our own personal bodyguard, provided that we surrender unto him, take shelter by chanting his holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Going back to the story of Prahlad Maharaj and Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyakashipu had this boon from Brahma, the creator of the universe, that he wouldn't be killed inside the house or outside the house, by day or by night, by land or sea or air. He wouldn't be killed by any weapon of man or beast, nor by any man or beast. He got these boons from Brahma, the creator of the universe. He first asked for immortality, but Brahma said, even I have to die, so I can't give you what I don't have. Then going to plan B, Hiranyakashipu asked for all these other boons, and having achieved them, he couldn't see any way by which the Lord could kill him. He could not conceive, having achieved the boons that he had obtained from Brahma, he could not conceive of any way that the Lord could kill him. But when he had a 5-year-old son named Prahlad, and that Prahlad turned out to be a devotee who constantly chanted Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hiranyakashipu, consciously or unconsciously, decided to confront Prahlad, to test Prahlad. And basically what it came down to is Hiranyakashipu was trying to kill Prahlad based on the boons and powers that he'd received from Lord Brahma, the creator of this universe. And Prahlad, by way of defense, not only is a human being who's the weakest of all the species of life, but he's a 5-year-old human being. Many species, their offspring, can be independent after a few months or a year. Our baby llamas, typically, the mothers give birth standing. They drop 18 inches onto the ground. They lie there exhausted seeing the light of day after 11 months being packed up in the womb. But they don't lie there for very long. After a half an hour, they're stirring. They've recovered themselves to the degree that they're struggling to stand. And within an hour, generally speaking, of most Lama births, they're standing. And then they want food. And God has already provided the food for them. And the mother's teats have turned from containing blood to having milk. The food is there. And intuitively, the baby Lama knows that. So the next thing he tries to do after standing, which takes half an hour to an hour, he tries to find the nipples of the mother. And the mother, she also instinctively knows that she wants the baby to suck her nipples. She gets a deep sort of pleasure from that. So she makes herself available. She stands very still while the little being probes and hit and miss and trial and error. He's looking all over her body, under her chest and her belly and her back legs and her butt and her everywhere, until he finally finds these 4 little nipples, and he starts to squeeze them. At first, he doesn't have enough strength, the jaw strength, to really go for it. And the nipples are plugged with a little wax, so you have to have a bit of strength to expel those plugs of wax before the milk starts flowing. And it's all I mean, it's very rare that within that that outside of 4 hours, that little baby who's just been born is up, moving, walking, eating, and even running the first day. Compare that to human beings. We're not self-sufficient till we're like 20. The more the technological, more society gives over technology, the later one becomes independent. Many people think they can't be independent until they're 27 or 30 years old with a PhD. But, you know, best case scenario, you live on a farm and you grow food, and the kids go out in the field at the age of 12 or 13. It's still a decade before a human child is self-sufficient. And here's Prahlad at 5 years old, the weakest of the weak, the youngest of the young, the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. But he has one thing on his side, that he's chanting the names of the Lord who creates millions of universes and who offers protection to those who surrender unto him. Long story short, the boon of Hiranyakashipu, which he decided to contest, Hiranyakashipu, with his boons from Brahma, decided to contest Prahlad's having taken shelter of the Lord who creates millions of universes and millions of Brahmas. These two forces confront each other, with the result that the boons that Hiranyakashipu had received from Brahma, the creator of the universe, who is only one Brahma amongst millions of Brahmas and millions of universes, totally collapsed when they decided to go up against this 5-year-old boy, defenseless 5-year-old boy who's chanting the names Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. So our topic today was the Lord creates in a unique way, and he provides defensive mechanisms for all varieties of living beings spread throughout all the different atmospheres and all the different planets of the universe. But over and above all of that, he offers special protection to those who take shelter of him by chanting his holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay. Natasha was the first one to jump on. Brent, Haribo, then Lilavati, then Bhavi, and Britta. And Brent's the first one to weigh in with a comment. He says, "You'll never be done seeing the material creation. You might as well just see it from a treadmill station. The spiritual world has so much more in store to adore, so prepare to go back home from this temporary mundane vacation." That really captures the spirit of what we're trying to say. You'll never be done seeing the material creation. You might as well just see it from a treadmill station. The spiritual world has so much more in store to adore, so prepare to go back home from this temporary mundane vacation. Just below that in the comment section, Britta says, "My Lord Sri Krishna, have mercy on me in the sea of material distractions. Keep my heart ever fixed on thee, O Lord of Lords. May I never forget you in my daily dealings, in my home, in my son's smile, all the while treading water in the ocean of ignorance. May I chant your holy names and remain ever the same as a spirit soul, longing for you. O Krishna, in your divine grace, guide me through the challenge of life. Help me to see beyond the illusion, to always remember your presence. For in your love I find solace, in your teachings I find wisdom. You are the light in my darkness, the peace in my chaos. So I pray to you, my Lord, to shower me with your blessings, to keep me on the path of righteousness, and to never let me stray from your divine light. For you are my refuge, my Savior, my eternal companion in this journey of life. O Krishna, may your mercy be upon me forever and always." That's a prayer that I feel confident. That's a heartfelt prayer that the Lord takes note of, Britta. You have used your unique talent, your literary talent, and mixed it with deep devotion to create this beautiful devotional masterpiece. Thank you for sharing it. And then just below this poetic offering, Britta says, "Isn't it amazing how many life forms exist just in our world? I too am always blown away by all the varied life on this planet. If you're not convinced of that, just turn on the Discovery Channel sometime today." Then Brent, you don't really even have to try to tap into Krishna's limitless supply, but we kick, scream, and cry to get a larger share for me, mine, and I. That pretty much describes the mentality of the inhabitants of this material world. Britta again, LOL, laugh out loud. "I remember wondering when my son was born, how in the world did such a helpless did such helpless creatures become the master of the earth? We're the most helpless of all at birth and for the longest time." Indeed. Well, thanks for joining me, all of you. And thanks for those who commented, and especially thanks for those who commented in a poetic way. I'll be sure to paste your comments in our YouTube post. And they're, of course, also there for some time, at least for 30 days on Facebook. So that's been we've had a wonderful 3 sessions. After a gap of 3 weeks, we come back with vengeance in a good way. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I feel, and I hope you agree with me, that we've covered a lot of ground. We've dug deep, we've unearthed some treasures, had some amazing realizations, and we'll be back with you next week for Motivational Monday. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare.